Thomas awakens in a metal elevator, devoid of memory, amidst supplies. He's startled by a pig before the elevator reaches the surface, where he's met by dozens of boys. Gally immediately labels him a greenie and roughly pulls him out. Thomas panics and attempts to escape, only to realize he's trapped in the glade, a walled clearing with no visible exit. He's placed in a cage, and leader Albie questions him, learning Thomas remembers nothing. Albie explains that amnesia is normal, except for names, which usually return. After Thomas promises not to run, Albie gives him a tour. The gladers survive by farming and building, with supplies arriving via the box. Once a month, the box brings fresh supplies and a new amnesiac boy. A greenie. Their purpose and who sends them are unknown. During the tour, Thomas notices a mysterious door, and Albie mentions the 3 rules. Do your part, never harm another, and never enter that door. Chuck finishes the tour, but Thomas is fixated on the door. When Ben and Minho emerge, Thomas is surprised, as they weren't supposed to enter. Chuck explains they are runners, and the maze is behind the wall. Thomas approaches the door but is pushed down by Gally, who reminds him of the rules. As Thomas demands an explanation, the maze shifts, and the door closes. That night, they celebrate Thomas's arrival. Newt informs him that runners map the maze daily, searching for an exit for 3 years without success. The maze changes nightly. If runners aren't out by the door's close, they must stay in the maze, where grievers kill anyone who stays. Thomas wants to be a runner, but Newt says they are chosen. Thomas is then accidentally knocked over during a wrestling match. Gally challenges Thomas to a wrestling match. Thomas surprisingly throws Gally, impressing everyone. Gally retaliates, causing Thomas to hit his head and remember his name. That night, Thomas dreams of running, a lab, and a woman saying, "Wicked is good." The next morning, Albie shows Thomas the name wall, noting crossed-out names of the deceased. While collecting fertilizer, Thomas finds a grave and bones. He's startled by a sick, growling Ben, who attacks Thomas, accusing him of causing their situation. Thomas escapes by hitting Ben with a skull. A chase ensues, and Thomas calls for help before being knocked down a hill. They return to the glade, and as Ben tries to kill Thomas, Newt intervenes. They restrain Ben and find a disturbing scar. Ben pleads for mercy, but they put him in the pit. Albie explains the changing, caused by a maze sting, happening in daylight for the first time. Knowing it will worsen, they sadly push a crying Ben into the maze before the door closes. That night, they cross Ben's name out. Thomas dreams again of the woman in a lab. The next morning, Thomas sees Albie enter the maze. Newt explains Albie went to retrace Ben's steps. Albie was the first glader and was alone for a month. Later, they worry as Albie and the runners are late. As the door closes, they see Minho carrying a wounded Albie. Thomas runs into the maze to help. Thomas finds Albie stung. They hide Albie by tying him to ivy. A griever appears, and Minho flees. Thomas hides, realizing the griever is mechanical. After it leaves, he hides again as it returns. He waits and explores. Goo falls on him, and he sees the griever climbing. It chases Thomas, who gets trapped. He climbs ivy and jumps to an upper corridor, getting cornered. He jumps and grabs the ivy. The griever lands on him, trying to sting him. The ivy breaks, dropping them. Thomas runs and bumps into Minho. The maze shifts, and Minho runs to lose the griever. Thomas taunts the approaching griever by running between closing walls. The next day, they are shocked to see Minho and Thomas bring Albie out, learning Thomas killed a griever. A meeting ensues. Gally wants to punish Thomas, but Minho suggests making him a runner. Everyone agrees except Gally. The box arrives early, empty except for an unconscious girl Thomas recognizes from his dream. Her note says she's the last one. She wakes, calls Thomas by name, and falls asleep again. Thomas suggests they can survive the maze and wants to return for answers. Minho convinces 3 runners to join. They find the dead griever in a beeping device. They examine it, finding WCKD, also on supplies. They conclude their senders made the grievers. Thomas wants to keep searching, but Gally wants punishment. Newt makes Thomas a runner after a night in the pit. Minho shows Thomas his maps in a mock-up, explaining they've mapped everything but found no exit. The device has a 7, so they believe the grievers come from that section. Teresa wakes and hides on the watchtower. She stops throwing things when she sees Thomas. He finds her with a knife. She remembers nothing but her name, Teresa. She recalls whispering Thomas's name in her sleep. Thomas explains, and Teresa shares her only memory, matching his dreams. She found 2 vials with blue liquid and WCKD, making Thomas realize Wicked is short for something. Believing his dreams, Thomas suggests injecting Albie. Albie freaks out, saying, "You shouldn't be here." They restrain him, and Teresa injects him, putting him to sleep. Gally locks Thomas in the pit. Chuck secretly brings him food and shows his doll. Chuck wants to find his parents. Thomas promises to get everyone out. In the morning, Thomas and Minho enter the maze. They reach section 7, which shouldn't be open. They find Ben's clothes. The device guides them to a new area. They find a bridge over an abyss in a wall. The device activates a hidden door. A tunnel covered in griever goo lies beyond. A light scans them, an alarm wails, and the tunnel closes. They run through section 7, narrowly escaping closing walls. They return to the glade, saying they found the exit. Gally worries it's a trap. Teresa announces Albie is awake. Albie says they can't leave and remembers, saying Thomas was their favorite and asking why he came. The maze door hasn't closed, and new doors are opening. Grievers emerge. Everyone runs to hide. Some hide in the box. A griever captures a boy outside. Thomas, Teresa, and others hide in the field, but a mechanical tail captures another. They run to Albie, seeing more being caught. Teresa sets a griever on fire. They lose more gladers. When Albie falls, they help him. Thomas confronts an incoming griever with a blade. The remaining gladers spear the griever, allowing them to lock themselves in the hut. The griever destroys the roof to kidnap another. A tail reaches for Chuck. They try to save him. Albie breaks the injection and hits the limb, dropping Chuck. The griever returns and captures Albie, who tells Thomas to get everyone out. The noise stops. They leave the hut and find only survivors and the box occupants. Gally attacks Thomas. Desperate, Thomas injects himself with the sting and passes out. He dreams of the lab, Teresa, experiments, and the woman insisting, Wicked is good. Thomas wakes in the pit with Teresa, who saved him. Newt, Minho, and Chuck explain Gally has turned the gladers against Thomas. Thomas agrees and reveals he remembers, Wicked experimented on them before sending them to the maze. He and Teresa were part of Wicked. The glade and maze are a test. They agree to finish it. Thomas and Teresa are taken to Gally, who is crossing out names. Gally wants to throw them in the maze, but some are hesitant. Thomas uses the distraction to escape, and Minho restrains Gally. Thomas announces their departure, inviting others. Gally scoffs, but half join them. They reach section 7 and find a griever guarding the tunnel. They attack it, pushing while dodging its tail. A boy is thrown off the bridge. Teresa attacks a leg, accidentally activating the device, which flies off. Chuck retrieves it and sees a second griever. Teresa pulls Chuck back. They push the griever into the abyss, but 2 more appear. While the boys hold them back, losing more, Teresa and Chuck take the device to the door. They enter the tunnel and find another door requiring an 8-digit code. Thomas realizes it's the maze section sequence, which Minho recites. A griever jumps on him. A glider distracts it, saving Minho. They retreat while fighting grievers. Minho finishes the code, and Teresa opens the door. They find a corridor in a modern building. They reach an exit door, revealing a lab with dead scientists. Computers show security footage of the glade. Thomas presses a button, and Dr. Ava Page, Wicked's director, appears on a recording. She explains the maze trials were to find a cure for the flare virus. The immune children were studied in harsh environments. Wicked kept this secret. The video ends with Ava's suicide. As they process this, another door opens. Before they can react, Gally appears, and Teresa sees he's stung. Gally says there's no freedom and opens fire as Minho throws a spear. A stray bullet hits Chuck. Before dying, Chuck gives Thomas his doll. While the group mourns, armed individuals arrive to take them away. A helicopter awaits. Ava is alive, saying Phase 2 begins.